Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a user guide for your Canon R100. Now, if you just picked it up, congratulations on picking it up. If you are thinking about purchasing it, well, this isn't a review, but this is a free user guide to show you exactly how I personally would set up this camera's menu system, as well as walk you through what all of the functions and features are, what the buttons are, where the battery goes, the basics of the basics, so you can get out there and start shooting with the camera that you have or you're about to purchase. There is a table of contents down below in the description, so if you want to skip the basic stuff and get right to the menu settings, well, you can do that if you choose. Now let's start with the most basic of things, and I'll tell you where the battery and memory card go. Right here on the bottom of the camera, you flip this door open, you see this little gray switch, I can push that out of the way, it pops the battery out. Now when you purchase this, the battery probably won't be in the camera, so you'll just have to put it in there. It only goes in there one way. This is your rechargeable battery. I always recommend having a second one, especially if you're traveling, just because if something happens to one or you run out of some juice, well, it's always good to have another battery ready to go. So to put it in, you just use the battery to move that switch, pop it down, shut the door, put that lock back on it, and you're good to go. Now, the reason it flipped back open is because some cameras allow you to just click it and tick it. No, that's your seatbelt, but they allow you to click it and lock it in just like this. Now let's talk about your SD card. Right here on the bottom, once again, where the battery is, there is a place for the SD card. I press down and it pops out. I press in and it goes ahead and secures itself in the camera. So you want to get an SD card. Remember, don't cheap out and get the most inexpensive SD card out there in the world, some no-name brand. Some name brands like you can think of, you've got SanDisk, ProGrade, Lexar. Do not look into like Amazon brand type things. I would not recommend buying really inexpensive SD cards, because if something happens to the SD card and it fails, then what was the point of taking all the pictures with this nice little camera here just to cheap out and get a really inexpensive SD card? So try to buy from a reputable place. I have some links down below where you go to B&H or Allen's Camera or Adorama. Amazon is a little more risky when you're purchasing cards. You just want to make sure that you buy a genuine SD card from one of the reputable manufacturers, because you don't want anything to go wrong with your card. Now, putting it in the camera, super easy. It only goes one way. In this way, the sticker is going to be towards you. You press it down, shut the door, lock the lock, and now you're ready to go. Now, one of the scariest things for new photographers, especially when you're getting an interchangeable lens camera, which is what this is. Interchangeable means I can take this lens off and put one of these lenses on the camera and have it work. Now, keep in mind, when you are purchasing lenses for this Canon camera, you can't buy a Nikon, you can't buy a Sony, a Pentax. Those lenses will not fit onto this mount. This uses what's called an RF mount. There's two types of lens options you can get from Canon. You've got an RFS line of lenses, which is what is designed for your crop sensor camera, or you could also put on there full frame RF lenses as well. So keep that in mind when you're out there making purchases. We do have a link down below to different RF lenses that you can get from Canon or a reputable dealer, but check that out. But always remember, you want to make sure that you're getting an RF or an RFS lens when you're upgrading for this type of camera. Now, interchangeable means we can take it off just like I said. There's a button right here that releases the lens. I press that in and I rotate towards me if I'm holding it in my left hand. Here's the lens and here is the RF mount. That is out here. This is your image sensor. You never want to touch your image sensor. So generally, I wouldn't want to just sit here and have the image sensor exposed like this, because you might get dust in there, or if it's raining, you get rain in there, and you don't want that to happen. When you're changing lenses, you generally want to make sure that it's not windy out, or you put your back to the wind, but you want to make sure that the camera is pointed down so that dust can't, fall onto it, and it more likely will fall out of it in this case. Now, to put a lens onto the camera, you see this red line right here. You have a line on the lens. You have a line also on the camera. You're going to line those two up. Ready? There. Turn away from me. You hear the click, and now it's on. Press the release button, turn it towards you. Now it's off. It's real simple. Line up your lines, connect it, and you're good to go. I know that might be one of the most scary things ever. Remember, do not touch that sensor. Do not let kids touch that sensor. Do not let dogs touch that sensor. You don't want anything getting into that inside of the camera that might damage the sensor, which would render your camera basically useless and you'd have to send it out to repair. I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just making you aware that you want to be careful when you are changing lenses. Now let's talk about turning it on. Well, we have an on and off switch. Guess what happens when we turn it on, Steven?
Turns on.
Hey, that's correct. Flip it to on, flip it to off. Not very hard. You've got a mode dial right here. You've got your A+ mode. That means if you go into this and you did bad in school, you automatically do good in school now because A+. It's not exactly what it is. So the A+ mode is Scene Intelligent Auto mode. Now, what does that mean? That means the camera's gonna do everything for you. You just turn it on and you let the camera shoot and you go to town. That's fine. When you first pick up a camera, leave it in auto and just start shooting and enjoy it. But the reason I make these videos is to hopefully help you graduate and get into the manual mode so at least you understand what is going on. But when you're first starting out, it's okay to be in auto. I was in auto for a long time when I first started out. My main recommendation is go shoot. Keep shooting, keep learning, and when you feel that you're being held back by auto mode, that's the time you start to explore other settings and other modes so that you can start to take control of your camera and become a better creator, photographer, and videographer. So that's A+ mode. Then around the dial, we've got P, which is program mode, which is basically like full auto, but it unlocks a bunch of the menu settings that wouldn't be there if you were just in the A+ mode. We've got TV, which doesn't mean that you can turn on to watch TV. You've got smartphones for that these days. This is shutter priority, where you set the shutter speed that you want and the camera's gonna do the rest for you. AV is aperture priority. You set the aperture or the f-stop of the lens, which is how much light is being let in, and it also controls the depth of field and the bokeh. You know, if you use your cell phone and you take a picture and you add that fake bokeh, well, the one way that you can control that is by controlling your f-stop. And so if you're an aperture priority, you can go ahead and set that to the widest aperture, and the camera's gonna go ahead and set the rest of the settings to make sure that your exposure is correct. Manual mode, which is where I personally live, is where you set the shutter speed, the aperture, the ISO, and you are in full control of the exposure settings. That doesn't mean that you're not shooting in autofocus. That means that you are shooting with manual settings for everything else. Now, I personally shoot with autofocus the majority of the time because my eyes aren't very good, but the autofocus in this camera is sensational and does a fantastic job. Now, this movie camera is your movie recording setting. So if you're gonna go in to shoot movies and you wanna get to 4K, the highest res, you can now go into this mode, and that is going to be the mode just for shooting movies. You can also shoot video while you're in stills mode, but you don't have all of the settings available when you do that, but it is really easy to switch into this mode to get the settings that you want. Then you've got your creative filters. I don't personally ever touch those. If you want to shoot creative filter-wise, I would personally just stick with a cell phone. You don't buy a camera like this to shoot in mosaic or do some weird stuff that you could do after the fact. That's really not what I would recommend doing. You then have scene mode, so if you're going to photograph sports or you're going to photograph landscapes or portraits, you can go in there and then the camera is going to figure out what you're shooting based off of what you picked and give you a general idea or the general settings for that particular subject and help you get better results, or hopefully get better results than you'd get on your own. Moving around to the next dial, we've got hybrid auto, which is a new feature they've added to this camera. I don't use these auto modes, but this might take some of your images and some videos and make slideshows and be a little more creative. Really not something that I personally would do. And then that takes us back to the A+ mode. So that takes you around the mode dial on this camera. Let's move around to some of the other buttons. Right here is your record button. Now that's going to activate recording video and also stop recording video. You might be able to change which button does recording video in the custom setting menu, which we will show you a little later on. Now I'm going to turn this camera off. I had it on just for now, real simple. You flip it off, you're going to conserve some power there. Remember what I said about batteries. You've got a command dial right here. This is going to control your shutter speed in one setting. It's going to control your aperture in another setting, and it's going to help you make other changes in other features. Now, in more expensive cameras, they add a secondary dial in the back. This camera just has one dial, so when I show you how to change that in the next section in this video, you're going to understand it, because honestly, I had to figure it out for myself. When you are just shooting with one dial, it's a little more complicated at the beginning, but you will get used to it. And if I don't tell you where it is, you're gonna kind of have trouble figuring it out on your own. That's why we make a guide like this. This is your shutter button. So when you press the shutter button all the way down, you're gonna take a picture. So let me do that for you right now. I'm pressing it all the way down. You hear that? We're taking a picture. So that's what happens when you press it all the way. If you press it halfway, and try this with me if you're sitting at home, you can press it halfway, not all the way, and that's activating your focusing points. Right now it's in auto, and as it's in focus, you hear that beep. That's letting you know that it's in focus. You can turn that beep off if you want to be silent. You have that because you don't always want to make noise when you are shooting. So shutter button, really simple to understand. Moving around to the top, this is your hot shoe. This is where you would put a flash. This is where you would put a microphone or other accessories that you want. Now in newer cameras, they have something called a digital hot shoe, which means you could use a specific microphone that would pass the audio data right from the microphone into the camera. In this case, if we were to put a microphone on top, you would have to plug it into the side where it says MIC, which is mic. That's where you would put your microphone. You just open up this little rubber door, and that's where you would plug in the microphone into the camera. And you would just use the hot shoe to hold your microphone. So that is what the hot shoe does. And since we're over here on the side of the camera, you also have a port for a remote control. Let me jump in here real quick because I want to show you how easy it can be to edit your JPEGs and your RAW files in a matter of seconds with FroPack 4, which are our custom Lightroom presets. So here's all I need to do with one click. Blue's Clues, C41, it gives it that awesome filmic look. We've got Copper Tone, DeLorean, High C, Kaleidoscope, we've got Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, Thick, Tintype, and Wet Hot American Summer, all from FroPack 4. But I want to show you my all-time favorite, which is in FroPack 1, and it's called Skittles. Check this out. One click, and boom. So look, if you're new to photography, you're not sure how to edit your photos, you need a great starting point, we created 14 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at fronosphoto.com/FroPack4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. If you want to save even more and get Skittles from FroPack 1, you can get the Grand Slam bundle that includes FroPack 1, 2, 3, and 4, and you'll save a ton. So that's how easy it is to edit your JPEGs or your RAW files both on the desktop as well as mobile. Now, let's get back to the user guide. Coming back to the top of the camera, being that I mentioned a hot shoe, that's where you would end up putting your flash. Your camera does have a flash built in. Now that's right here. You see this little notch? I pop that up and you got this really teeny tiny flash right here, which is gonna be good for roughly 5 to 8 feet in front of you. If you're at a concert or a venue and you wanna take a picture of someone on stage, don't pop your flash up, because all you're gonna light up is that bald-headed person in front of you. No offense to bald-headed people, I'm sorry, I've got a lot of hair, but you don't really need to pop the flash off in every situation. The camera might say, hey, pop up your flash in this situation, which it did earlier here, and I didn't like the way the picture looked with it because it's not as natural as using the light that we have around us. So I don't use the flash very often, but if you're just at a party or you're out doing drinking at a bar and you want to take pictures with your friends, then just pop the flash up and the camera's gonna do the rest of the work for you. You might notice these little dots right here. These dots, that's your microphone, so that's where it's gonna record the audio for your video, and then the speakers are right here over the R100. That is the speaker that's gonna play back the audio that you recorded. Moving on to the right side of the camera, we have a USB port and we have an HDMI port. Now, being that this has a USB-C port, you are able to charge your battery back up inside the camera, which isn't a bad thing. So if you have a charger for your cell phone, just make sure you have a USB-C cable, plug it into here, and you should be able to put juice back into the bottle. And by bottle, I mean your battery. So if you're into strap-ons, this is where you put it. Your strap goes right here into this slot, and it goes into this slot as well. I'm not a fan of traditional straps that you put on. I use something called a Black Rapid strap. There's people like Peak Design. They make different options for you. I don't like the traditional strap, but I'd rather have you use a traditional strap around your neck than nothing at all, just in case you end up dropping this. Now let's move around to the back of the camera. This is your electronic viewfinder, or most commonly known now as an EVF, electronic viewfinder. That's where you're gonna put your eye up to look through the camera and take the photos. Now that I say that, it reminds me that this might be your first camera, so let me show you exactly how I think you should hold a camera. And by think, this is how you should hold a camera. Right hand, right here. Unless you don't have a right hand, we're not talking about people without right hands right now. If you have two hands, you put your hand right here, your left hand goes underneath the lens like this. You put it up to your eye, either your left or right eye, and this is how you zoom. You just use your thumb and forefinger to zoom. You don't hold the camera like this. That looks like an amateur, but also it just isn't as stable when you're holding it. Tripod stance. Tuck these elbows in, pull the camera up to you. Now this is how you shoot photos. Finger right on the shutter button, just like that. Not like this. I know that you're so used to using cell phones and other cameras that didn't have viewfinders, but holding a camera like this is not stable. It's tiresome on the arms. It looks amateurish, though most people don't care about that anymore because a lot of people shoot like this. The way that I recommend that you shoot is technically the right way. You do this. And by technically, it's my way, which I think is the right way again, but you hold it like this. To go vertical, you have two options. You can shoot under like this, which is awkward, or you could shoot over like this. I fall into the camp of shooting over for some reason in this case. I think this is a little better and easier to do. Just keep that in mind. Don't be the person that shoots like this at all. I don't recommend that you do that. So the recommendation is always use the electronic viewfinder. Now, if you wear glasses like me, I don't actually wear glasses when I shoot, so I take them off. You can control the diopter, which is if you have your eyes and they're not great, you can go ahead and move this diopter left or right. Now, how you set this is all you need to do is turn the camera on, look at the menu system with your eye up to the viewfinder, and move the diopter until it's nice and sharp. Now, here, let me show you the back of the camera, Steven, real quick. This is Steven back here. This right next to the viewfinder, that is a proximity sensor. So when I put my finger there, it's gonna go ahead and change to the electronic viewfinder. I move it, it goes back to the LCD screen, back to the viewfinder. If you ever find that it's stuck on the viewfinder, that might mean that you have dust on there, or it maybe got some rain on there, because raindrops keep falling on my head, but if they fall right there on the sensor, it's going to think that your eye is up to it. So just clean it off and then you are good to go. Right here is your LCD screen. Now, a lot of you are used to touching the screen for focus and touching the screen on your cell phones. This is actually not a touch screen. It's one of the ways that they were able to keep down the price of this camera. I personally would have liked to have seen a touch screen because we're all so in tune with using those these days, but they didn't do it in this case, and that's not a big deal. It's not the biggest deal in the world. We can still use the buttons to get to where we need to go to. Just know that this is not a touch screen, so the more you touch it, the more MC Hammer is going to be like, can't touch this, burn. Anyway, info button. That's gonna toggle the different info on the back of the screen. This is your playback button. So when you press that, it's gonna play back your images and you can arrow through them. You have your menu button right here. This is your D-pad. So you can press up, you can press down, you can press left, you can press right, you can press left, right, up, down, left, right, BA, select, start. And that will give you 30 people. I'm not gonna say men anymore because it's 30 people in Contra. You also have some predetermined buttons here that we can change in the custom setting menu, but they are already set to good things like ISO and then frames per second, as well as timer, flash control, Q and set. So think of set and Q like your OK button, and Q will also bring up a menu on the back of your camera. And then up is going to be a very important one that we talk about when I turn the camera on and show you how to manually control it. Now there's two more buttons on the back here. You've got this button and this button, which I don't don't use when I'm shooting photos. Now I can map those out for something different in the custom menu setting, which I might do a little later, but these do come in handy when you are reviewing your images, because you see on the side here, there's a little magnifying glass and a checkerboard. So if I was to press the bottom one, it would be going from a full screen of one image. If I hit it, it goes to like 4 images. You hit it again, it goes to like 12 images, and then you get all the checkerboard, a ton of images up on the screen. And the way that you zoom in on an image is you would hit this top star button. Now moving around to the bottom of the camera, we already showed you that you have your battery door where the memory card goes as well, but you also have your tripod mount, your 1/4-20. This is where you would connect your tripod or a tripod plate if you were going to go ahead and shoot with a tripod. Around the front of the camera, there was one more thing I needed to show you. That is this little LED light here that lights up orange. That is a distraction and a bad thing to have on, so I'll show you how to turn that off inside of the camera in the next section when we get through to the menus. But that right there is the outside of the camera. Now let's move on to the menu settings. Now let's dive into the menu settings. Now this is going to be one of the longer sections of the video because I'm going to take you through menu by menu to show you how I personally would set up the camera, which is I think a pretty good way for you to get a starting point, because I remember when I first started out, it wasn't digital cameras, but I didn't know where to set anything because I didn't know what everything meant, and reading the manual wasn't as fun as someone sitting there and telling me how to do it. So what you're seeing right now on the screen, this is an Atomos. This is a recorder that's allowing me to show you exactly what my camera is seeing and what you're going to see when you're in the menu system. But when I use this external display and recorder, I lose the functionality to see what is on the screen. So just understand that. That's why I'm looking at this screen right here. So we're going to go into the menu system. We are set to the A+ mode, which you have set when you first get the camera. When I hit the menu, this is what pops up. You get this nice looking icon display that isn't representative of future Canon cameras that you're going to purchase. Some of the higher level cameras just have a basic menu system. But remember when I said you have limited choices when you're in auto to change settings? This is what I mean. You do not have full on control of all of the different settings that your camera offers you because it's meant to be full auto and you don't really need to come in here and do very much. But I want to show you what's going to happen when you take full control of your camera by switching into manual. So I'm turning the top dial. We are now in manual, and I'm going to go ahead and hit the menu button once again. And you see, I don't like this white display. This isn't something that I normally use, but I have the option of hitting the OK button. Remember, not a touch screen. You can't touch this. Do. It's not an old joke. I'll keep doing it forever. I don't care, because anytime someone says you can't touch this, you know what you're thinking. Unless you don't know who MC Hammer is, in which case I'm old. So let's hit the OK button, which is the set button to hit OK. Right here it says Menu Display Guide. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to go down to Standard. This is the standard look that you're going to get right here. This is what all Canon cameras offer you when you start stepping up in the game. The good news is the menu systems are very similar from this camera to the most expensive camera that Canon offers. So if you do graduate to another one, you pick it up, it's like you're home, because you already know how to use the menu and where most things are. So you have another option called Mode Guide. I'm going to leave that enabled, and Feature Guide is great because you just see it popping up on the screen. It's a little bit of like, it's like Clippy or Flutie in the top corner. He's in the top corner and he's helping you figure out what these settings are. See how it pops up and it says display brief descriptions when you select functions or setting items. So that's nice to have. So now that this is all set, I leave that on enabled. Let's go an arrow all the way over or turn this top dial. We can keep turning it, and that's going to take us all the way to red menu number 1. This gets us to image quality. It's going to be set to JPEG to start. I personally shoot everything on RAW. So you can see we can't touch the screen, so we have to figure out how do we move things. On the right side of the screen, you see it looks like a rainbow, but it's not colorful. That is a dial. That's your top dial. So that's showing you that if you turn the top dial, I'm going to RAW or C-RAW, which is small RAW. I'm not a fan of shrinking RAW files. I'll stay in RAW file all the time. Let me explain it real quick. RAW is an uncompressed image format. It is all of the data that your camera is capturing, whereas JPEG is a lossy file, meaning when you take the picture, it's baked in. If you go and make changes on your computer and you save over the original, it's baked in. You can't go back and start over. But a RAW file, you can always go back and re-edit. Now, you do need to have editing software like Adobe Lightroom to go ahead and open those RAW files, and at some point you might graduate to do that. I always shoot RAW, but when you're first starting out, you could shoot RAW plus JPEG, or you could start off with just JPEG. Just understand that a JPEG is going to be a smaller file with not as much data in there, but JPEGs out of the camera are very good. I always go back to the RAW file because I want the most data possible. So just keep that in mind if you're deciding whether to shoot RAW or to shoot JPEG or to shoot both. Now, where we're at JPEG, if I use the arrows, which I'm assuming is arrow right and arrow left, that is going to change what mode I want. Do we want it to be small? The answer is probably not. Large, the highest quality. Remember, you can't dumb up quality, but you can dumb quality down. So either shoot RAW or shoot large JPEG. Memory cards are really inexpensive, and here it's telling me that if I shoot RAW and JPEG large, I'm only gonna get 1,333 photos. And I say only, that's not that bad. But if I go and turn off RAW, I'm now getting 6,121 photos in large JPEG with a 64 gigabyte card. So personally, you're gonna have to decide what you're gonna choose. First thing I do when I get a camera is I turn it right into RAW. To set these in, we hit that set and OK button right there, and now you are set right there. Let me jump in here real quick and say, would you like me to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations? If you said yes, just look for this orange box on phronosphoto.com, put your name, email address in it, hit send it. I'm gonna send you that guide for free. We've got still image aspect ratio. 3:2 is what the image sensor captures. I do not change that. I leave it on 3:2. 4:3 is old TV format. 16:9 is what you see when you're shooting, when you're watching movies. Now, this would just record that format when you're doing a JPEG. You take a picture, it's gonna be in 16:9. You're not gonna be able to get all of that data back that you are missing out because you are cropping the sensor. 1:1 is a square. So if you want to shoot square images, this is how you would do it. But remember, when you're shooting JPEG, you're going to lose that outside area, so you're losing data. You're just throwing it away. I rather have you crop after the fact if you want to go ahead and do that, but I leave it in 3:2. Exposure compensation, we don't touch. I leave it right where it's at. Now let's go into ISO speed settings. Your ISO out of the box is going to be set to auto. I am not a personal fan of shooting in auto. If you're going to want the camera to do everything for you because you're not ready to take control of it, auto is going to be fine. The camera's going to do all the work for you. It's going to say if I'm in a dark situation, it's going to put that ISO up a little higher. If you're in a bright situation, it's going to drop it down. The auto settings are very good in these cameras. So when you start out, I don't have a problem with you shooting in auto. Go for it. Just give it a try. Personally, I like to go in and I change the ISO sensitivity myself. The lower the number, the less sensitive to light your image sensor is going to be. So think of 100, 200, 400 ISO, more for outside. If it's a cloudy day or the sun is slightly out or it's partly cloudy with a chance of meatballs, then you want to protect your camera from those meatballs because they'll probably hurt or taste good. It depends. So just remember that. As you get into darker situations, you want to raise your ISO up higher because that's going to allow it to capture images in lower light situations. But there's a thing called noise and grain where your images get grainy if you shoot at higher ISOs. Just keep that in mind when you're shooting. The lower is going to be cleaner, but there is also nothing wrong with having a little bit of noise and grain because we used to have that when we were shooting film. And I'll show you how to change your settings a little later when we're going through the functions on the back of the screen. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it set to 100 ISO. If you were going to shoot for auto ISO and leave that on, you can set that your ISO does not go higher than 6400, which is going to be a little noisy and a little grainy, but if you're just shooting for fun and just starting to learn, 6400 is going to be fine in most situations. Next up, we have Auto Lighting Optimizer. So currently it is off because I'm in manual, so it's turning it off automatically. But if you want to turn it on, you hit Info, and then you can have it do low, standard, or high. Now this is going to be something that you use if you're shooting JPEG and you want the camera to brighten up shadow areas and kind of give you a pretty even across the board look. I personally keep it off but if you're new, maybe give it a shot and try it on standard or low. I'm gonna go ahead and continue to keep it off personally. We've got highlight tone priority, improve gradation in highlights to avoid overexposure in bright subjects. I leave this off. I don't touch that at all. Again, when you shoot RAW, you don't have to worry about that. And even when you shoot JPEGs, I leave this off because the camera does a great job. Moving on, there are two ways to move up. I could hit the arrow key to the right, or I could turn this top dial, and that's how you can arrow through the different menu settings. Flash control, well, I'm not gonna go through all this because most of the time you guys are not gonna take manual control of your flash. You're just gonna leave it on the settings that it has and let it do its job. Metering mode is another thing that you use, or we used to use when we shot manual. You've got evaluative, you've got partial, spot metering, and then center weighted average. I leave it on evaluative metering at this point. It's gonna take an average of your scene, the brightest part and the darkest part, and give you the average in there. But remember, you have an electronic viewfinder. So you have the exposure simulation right in front of your face. So if it looks too bright or it looks too dark, it's exactly gonna be too bright or too dark, so you know that you need to make a change. So the metering mode is not as important today as it was yesterday. White balance is set to auto white balance. You've got auto white balance, you've got daylight, shade, cloudy, tungsten. There's nothing in here that says meatballs, so remember, you can't set it to meatballs. Auto white balance is gonna be very good. Remember, if you shoot JPEG, your auto white balance is gonna be baked in, or your white balance that you choose is gonna be baked in. So if you're on daylight and it doesn't look right, remember, that's gonna be saved to that image file. If you shoot RAW, you can change the white balance after the fact because you have all of the data to go back and change it later. Generally speaking, auto white balance is gonna be very good unless you're using lights like we're using in the studio where you know exactly what the color temperature is. You can change that and set that yourself. I know I might be losing some of you guys because some of this is over your head, but it's nice to know that your camera has these more advanced features even if you're just starting out and shooting pretty basic stuff. Custom white balance, we're not going to go ahead and set that right now. White balance shift, leave this where it is. Color space, leave it on sRGB as well. Picture style is currently set to auto. You've got standard, portrait, landscape, fine detail, neutral, faithful, it's not gonna cheat on you, monochrome, and then you have some user defaults 1, 2, and 3. So if you're shooting portraits, it's gonna set the sharpness and contrast a specific way. Now, picture control or picture style is only going to affect your JPEG files. Your RAW files, it doesn't matter because when you bring them into the computer, it's all zeroed out and you have full control after the fact. But what you want to keep in mind is when you set your picture style, that's going to take effect in your video images, your video files that you're recording. So if you were to shoot in monochrome for video, you're never gonna get back that color data. If you're gonna shoot monochrome for your stills and you're in JPEG, it's only gonna give you black and white images. So that's all you're gonna ever get. But if you shoot RAW files in monochrome, the preview that you see in the camera, it's gonna be black and white. But when you get it into the computer, you can reset it and bring back that color detail. So I'm not a fan of shooting any of these monochrome or setting it to this so that you lose all that color data. I personally rather do that after the fact and find that auto is gonna do a very good job like the rest of the camera for you guys just starting out. Lens aberration correction, I leave this exactly how it's set for your camera or the lens combination that you put on. It's gonna make corrections that it sees fit. It's something that you don't need to worry your mind about because the camera and the lens are gonna talk to each other and give you the best results. Long exposure noise reduction. So if you are shooting an exposure of 20 seconds or 30 seconds because you're photographing the stars or something, then noise reduction is going to kick in. I leave noise reduction off. Noise reduction ends up looking smooth and like a mosaic image, a watercolor painting, and I think that looks terrible when the camera goes ahead and uses that. Back in the day, we had no problem with film grain because it looked natural. You can still have noise with digital cameras that looks natural, so I don't worry about that. I leave long exposure noise reduction off. Now with high ISO speed noise reduction, the higher the ISO, the more noise and grain you're gonna see. Again, I turn this all the way to off because I don't like the smoothing effect that the images take on when you leave this on. So I hit OK, and now I have that off. dust delete data. It says obtain data for removing dust, use alongside software, something we don't worry about at all at this point. AF operations, you have 2 operations. You've got one shot and servo. Let me just show you what this means. So I'm gonna go here, let's see a preview. You're seeing exactly what my camera is seeing. One shot means that when I press the button halfway down and you hear that beep and I leave my finger pressed halfway down, the focus is not gonna change and shift. It is one shot, it's single focus. So you're only gonna get that. It's not continuous focus for sports. But when we go back into the menu and we go to servo, servo means continuous autofocus. So as I move around, you get the blue boxes, not the green boxes. So it's continuously focusing the whole time that I'm pressing my finger halfway down on the shutter. So this is what you're gonna wanna use when you are shooting action, so that the camera can track your subjects and not have you have to press the button halfway down every time that you wanna refocus it. So in this case, I like to use servo for 99% of the time because most things that I'm shooting are moving subjects. We've got AF method, we've got choose an autofocus method, no snap. I wanted to curse there. But this looks like a smiling face to me. Does it still look like a smiling face to you, Steven? Yes. It looks like a nose with a smile. I don't know why, but that's exactly what it is. So I leave it on for, I think it's an L for lock-on tracking, but they call it a face. But lock-on tracking is what I like to use. I'm gonna go ahead and show myself here. So I'll show you. See? There it is. That's the lock-on tracking. It's IAF, it's finding me. That is the most incredible thing you'll ever find in a camera, is the fact that it can find your eye from anywhere. That is gonna make shooting so much better. You couldn't do that back in the day. That is a fantastic setting. So that's what that looks like with that. You've got spot AF, meaning if there's a specific spot you know you wanna focus in, you could switch into that. 1-point AF, very similar to that, just gonna be a slightly larger box. And then zone AF is gonna take a larger area for autofocus, but the lock-on tracking is the one that I personally use all the time. You saw that eye detection was enabled. Awesome to have enabled, unless you don't want to track someone's eye. Unless you're trying to shoot an object or a subject and there's a face around it and you don't want it to hit the face, then you would want to disable that. Continuous autofocus, camera continually focuses until you press the shutter button halfway. I hate this, I turn this off. I want to control my autofocus. You got your focusing mode, this is autofocus or manual. You're gonna be in autofocus all the time. I really don't see there's a need for manual at this point. Most of you will not be there. Let me jump in here real quick and say this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio that you're in full control of, well, you should probably consider using Squarespace, which I've been using for close to 15 years now for my personal website. I use it because it's simple, easy, affordable, and I don't need to know any coding, and I guarantee you in a matter of minutes, you can have a new gallery up and running to share with the world. To get a 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Moving on to red number 5. We've got manual focus peaking settings. That's if you were gonna be in manual focus. It would help you manually focus with the viewfinder to make sure your images are gonna be in focus. AF assist beam firing. Yep, lamp illuminates if needed to make focusing easier, even in low light. I call this distraction light. I turn it off. We don't need it. Your camera's gonna focus pretty much fine, and that orange light is super distracting if you're in a dark situation and you're watching subjects on stage. They're gonna be distracted. Like your kids are gonna be like, hey, turn off that orange light. You're distracting me, mom or dad. I don't like it. So I turn that off. Lens electronic manual focus takes effect with lenses that have electronic focusing ring. I don't change this. Focus control ring is currently set to focus. This is your control ring right here. So this would control your focus if you turned it right or turned it left and you were in manual focus. That's how I would go ahead and manually focus if I wanted to change it, but I don't do that. I shoot everything in autofocus. Red number 6, we start off with drive mode. These are your different settings. You got forward and reverse. You've got low gear. You don't. This isn't a car. This is how many frames a second you're gonna shoot. If it's on single frame, which is what this is, you're only gonna get one shot when you take a picture. In continuous shooting mode, you're going to bang out anywhere between 6 and 6.5 frames a second if it's in focus. So that's a lot, that's not bad. Kids running 6 frames a second, you're going to get the action right there. You've got a self timer, which is 10 seconds. You've got a self timer, which is 2 seconds. And you've got a self timer continuous, which will, when you shoot, set it to allow you to take up to 9 images, 10 images now in a row. So it's going to go beep, 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 click. And then it's going to go click, 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 click. It's going to keep taking those pictures, up to 10 of them. So those are the different options that you have. Generally speaking, continuous shooting in high speed is where I like to be. IS image stabilization mode, configure image stabilization settings. Your camera does not have image stabilization built into it, but many of the lenses that you're going to use do have image stabilization built into it. So this is where you would turn it on right here. Now you see that this is a movie camera. This is for your digital IS. That is currently enabled. So if you're moving or running, or if you're not on a tripod, you would want to put digital IS on just for certain situations. It's going to help keep your frame a little more steady. It's going to crop in just a little bit, so you're going to lose a little bit of your frame, but that's better than having it being herky and jerky. Review duration. Man, do I not like review duration. So if you've noticed and you've taken a couple of pictures with your camera before finding this video, and you take a picture and then you look and it pops up in your viewfinder or it pops up on the display, I find that to be distracting every time. So I turn this off, because when I take a picture, I know it's going to be the best picture ever. I don't need to look at it again until I look at it again to make sure that I got the picture. But I do that on my time. I don't want the picture popping up and distracting me, so I turn that off. Metering timer, 8 seconds is fine. Exposure simulation, this is important. So let me show you this real quick. Take the lens cap off, point it over here. So as I turn this top dial, do you see how my exposure is changing and it's getting really bright? Well, that's showing me the exposure simulation. It's showing me what my image is going to look like. If I see this in the picture in my viewfinder, I'm not going to take the picture because I know it's wrong. So I'm going to change my exposure and it's going to be right. When I'm in manual, this looks much better. So your exposure is right in your eyeball. It's right in front of you. So you're just going to need to learn the exposure triangle to understand what's a right shutter speed versus a wrong shutter speed, what situation to use them in. That's not this video. I have other videos to explain that, but that just shows you exposure simulation. You always want to keep that on when you're shooting, so enabled. Number 7, shooting info display. So you go into shooting screen info settings. Look at all the different options that you have. This is for the back screen. If it says VF, that's for the viewfinder. So you can go in and be like, I don't want this to come up. I don't want this to come up. I don't like this. And these are the 2 options that you have. You also have info for edit screen. You would hit info to get into the next menu and be like, you know what? I want to have this in there. You know what? I want the histogram in there. And then you would come down and hit OK, and those settings will be locked in. Scroll back down, hit OK again, and we just changed that. When we go back in, 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2 are set, but 3, 4, and 5 are not. That means you won't cycle through those when you're shooting photos. VF is viewfinder info display, toggle display. That's right here. So you can see what your different options are there, and you can, again, custom set those. VF vertical display is on. This means when you turn your camera vertically, the info display is going to move to the bottom of the screen and not have to have you look sideways to try and read it sideways, which is what we always did back in the day because it didn't auto-rotate, but this is awesome. Grid display, I turn the grid lines off, but if you want to have a checkerboard on your screen when you look through the camera, that might help you get your line straight, so that's something you could consider. And histogram display, you could set it for brightness and the different sizes. I don't use the histogram at all. I think that gets a little too complicated, so I don't set that at all. Next, we've got VF display format. So you could have display 1, which covers the entire display, or 2, shrinks it down. You still get the full display, but if you're wearing glasses, this is where it comes in handy because sometimes you can't fully see it, but they shrink it down just a little bit to make it easier for you to see. Display performance, I like to put it on the Rob Thomas mode, which is smooth, because it says quick moving subjects are displayed smoothly, so smooth, so I like to do that. I don't need it to be herky-jerky. I want it to be right there on smooth. Now, number 8, we've got movie record quality. This is only going to be the movie record quality when we're in the manual mode. So if you want to get to 4K and unlock the entire video menu, you would then go ahead and turn the top dial to that camera right there, and then you have the ability to unlock everything. But let's say I want to shoot in full HD at 2997. 30 frames a second, or 60 frames a second, or 24 frames a second. I can go ahead and select this, and if I hit the record button while in the manual mode, it will start to record video. You could also see that your total record time is 4 hours, 31 minutes, and 20 seconds. So you have the camera telling you exactly how much time you have left to record. Sound recording is currently set to auto. If you're ever gonna go in there and take control of your camera, you can change this and set it to manual, or disable it altogether if you're in a room and they say, we don't want audio recording. You can turn it off and disable it. Next up, we have the wind filter and attenuator. Wind filter, I kind of like to disable because it likes to squash your sound a little bit. Now, if you are in a windy area, maybe don't record there, but you could put on the wind attenuator. It might cut down on it a little bit, the wind filter, and the attenuator I generally leave on auto. If you are gonna take full control of your camera and you do have an understanding of it, you might wanna turn both of these off and you take full control of it. But knowing that this is a basic beginner camera, you're probably not doing that right off the bat. We then have ISO speed settings, but this is set for movies. You can see the movie camera right there. Same thing as when you are shooting stills, you can control your ISO settings there. Movie Servo AF, continuous focus to keep subjects sharp as movies are recorded. Yes, you want to enable that to let the camera record, let it use autofocus when shooting videos. Auto slow shutter, what is this set to? This is set to on. Automatically record brighter movies when dark. Yeah, I mean, I want the shutter, the slow shutter, I want to allow it to go there, so that's why I leave that on. Shutter button function for movies. Choose operation when shutter button is pressed halfway for movies. So you can go in here and it's going to show you that metering plus the camera servo, so it's going to do metering and autofocus, and you have a bunch of different options that you could do here. One shot or metering only. Leave it exactly where it was set when you got the camera because that is the best mode for there. And that takes us through the red menu, which is one of the most extensive menus in all of cameras. Moving on to the blue menu or the playback menu, we've got protect image, erase images, rotate stills. This is all happening after you take a picture. I don't come in here and touch anything under number 1. Let's see what we do under number 2. Nothing. So we do nothing under 2. Number 3, creative assist, creative filters. You can add creative filters after the fact, which is a good reason why you don't take pictures with the creative filters on anyway, because if you do that, they're baked in. They're gonna be JPEGs only, and you don't want that. But none of this, I don't do any of this in the camera. I do all of this in the computer if I need to do it. Number 4, we've got slideshow, set image search parameters, view from the last scene is enabled, an image with jump. So image, when you turn this is something that comes in handy. Say you have 1,000 pictures on your camera and you just took 25 or 30 in a row. Every time you turn this top dial, it's gonna jump ahead or jump back 10 images. That's a good feature to have. You could actually change it. So look at all these different things that you could do. You could set it to a custom different thing. You could change folders. Way too many options. We're leaving it on 10 right here and moving on to number 5. Playback info display. Look at all the info that you get when you play back an image. You don't need, I like this because it shows me the image full screen with some data on there. I like this because it's showing me all of the important data in a glance, but I don't need that histogram. I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need you. And I don't need you. I really only just need these two. They're really all you need when it comes to this. The other stuff is just too much data. Now, if I hit info, we also have the ability to, you could change between a brightness or RGB histogram. I don't care about RGB histogram, and I barely care about brightness histogram. All things that I don't use to help me get my exposure because I have exposure simulation on in the camera. I hit OK. We've got AF point display is currently disabled. This means when I take a picture and I hit the playback menu, which I'm not going to do right now because it would mess up my recording here, it would show you where your focusing points were. Right now it's disabled. I actually like that, so I enable it. HDMI output, HDR output is currently off. Display still images in HDR when connected to an HDR TV. I mean, who's plugging their stuff into a TV anymore? Steven, are you?
No.
No, Steven isn't, so nobody actually is. And that takes us out of there. Hey there, I just wanted to take a quick second to say thank you for watching this video. If you're enjoying it, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up because that helps people know that this is a good video. And if you want to see more content from us, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. There's over 3,000 videos that I've put out over the last 13 years, so there's a lot of free education as well as fun and informative content for you to check out. We're out of there, Steven. We're on to the Wi-Fi menu, which is purple. My favorite color, by the way. So you have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connectivity built in. You can connect this to the Canon Connect app, which means you can control your camera from the palm of your hands in your Android or iOS device. I don't think it's Windows capable, because I don't even think Windows phones even exist anymore. But this is where you would set everything up. There's simple videos on YouTube for how to do that. I'm not going to show you how to set this all up, but the app walks you through exactly how to do it. Now, airplane mode is off. If you wanted to go in and turn off the Wi-Fi settings, I don't do this when I travel, you would go in there and turn it off. Wi-Fi settings are enabled, Bluetooth settings are currently enabled. Your nickname for your camera is this, which is what it's set to. You can change this. You've got GPS settings. You do not have GPS built into this camera, but you could put in GPS data if you're connected to your cell phone, which knows exactly where you are, and that could put data into the camera. I don't use GPS data. I mean, if you want to know where you are in the world and you have connectivity and you're somewhere cool, you could take a picture with your iPhone or your Android, and that's going to save the data for you, and you could always look back at that later. We've got reset communication settings. Not doing that. We just set them, so we're not going to do that. And that is your Wi-Fi menu. Next menu is the wrench menu or the yellow menu. We've got select folder. I don't select the folder. I leave this exactly where it is. File numbering is continuous. I like to have continuous file numbering versus manual reset. Let's see, if I go in here, you've got auto reset. No, I don't want that to happen. I want continuous. Meaning, if I take 100 pictures today, I take the card out, I download everything, and I save it to the computer, and I put it back in, I don't want it to start at 1 again. I want it to keep going all the way up, and Canons will allow you to do numbers up to 9,999 before it resets back to 0. So continuous is where I like to go. Format card, which I'm not going to do this time because I took a couple of pictures. You go here when you put in a brand new card because you want the card and the camera to talk to each other, and you want to wipe it clean. You always want to wipe it clean in the camera. So this is where you would reformat the card when you are starting out to tell it to talk to the camera well, and that's where it's going to save your images. Now keep in mind, if you haven't backed up your images to a computer, to the cloud, to an external storage device, to multiple storage devices, and you go ahead and you format the card and you shoot photos over it, you cannot recover that data easily or at all. You just want to make sure that you've saved your data before you reformat everything. So I don't reformat my cards until I know that my files are on my computer and backed up to a secondary place, if not a third place, and in the cloud. The last thing you want to do is erase everything after you had your trip, the once-in-a-lifetime trip that you wanted to go on with your very nice camera. Now, auto rotate, it says on with a camera icon and a computer icon. That means it's going to rotate your image to fill this very little space if it's a vertical. If it's a vertical, it's just going to cover this area. I don't like that. I want to use the entire screen. Same thing with the electronic viewfinder. So I go ahead and I turn it on only on the computer. So if you shoot verticals, they're going to go into the computer rotated vertically, but in the camera, they're just going to be on the back of the screen. So you turn it vertically to see the full screen and not just a smaller portion. It's just way too hard to see it any other way. We've got add rotation info. We have this enabled, so it says movie shot vertically are displayed vertically on smartphones. That's a new thing. That's great to have. And then we've got your date and time. This is where you would go to set your date and time. Make sure that you set it when you start shooting because it's going to save all that information into your images in the metadata so you know exactly when you took it. Number 2, language, English. If I change it to something else like Spanish, then I start talking Spanish. But I don't know Spanish, so I will not change it. It doesn't actually change your speaking. It changes the menu system, obviously, to a bunch of different languages. We've got video system, NTSC, I leave it there. The beep that we heard earlier, I can leave that enabled, or I could turn it off because I don't want it on in certain situations, I could leave it off. Power saving, we have changed the power saving modes right here so the camera doesn't reset while we're filming, but there's not a lot to change. I think they have it set to the right place, and eco mode is currently off. Turns off the display to save power. I don't want to do that. I want to go ahead and use the display. Number 3 in yellow, we've got display settings. It's currently set to auto, but if I go in here and I go to manual, I can say that, well, I only want the display of the screen to show up and not have it show up in the viewfinder. I don't like that. I use the proximity sensor. That works the best. Screen brightness, we have it turned down just 1 for making this video, for the video purposes. When you get it, the best place to be is number 4, right in the middle. You don't want to go over bright or too dark because that's going to mess with your exposure if you're going to use that for your exposure, which I don't recommend you use the screen for your exposure, but the viewfinder brightness, I do use this. This is the one you don't want to make too bright or too dark because if you're shooting in manual, it might mess up your visual to see what's overexposed and underexposed. HDMI resolution set to auto, doesn't matter unless you're using HDMI for anything. We are not going to reset the camera because we just spent all this time setting it up. You've got your custom function buttons. We go in here. This is how you can control changing the different custom settings. So we've got ISO expanded. You could enable that or disable that. You've got safety shift, which I only think matters in football when the safety starts moving on the field. But this is the one that matters here. Custom controls. So we go into custom controls and you can see it's highlighting different buttons. We can change it. Let's say we don't want this flash button to do anything because we're not going to ever use flash. Well, I could change it to say set AF point to center. That's actually not a bad one for some things. Subject tracking detection. Ooh, one shot to servo, something that I would use. AF method. You just see that you have so many different options that you could change that setting to. You could have whatever you want. Honestly, you can change it. So that just shows you how you do it. Canon actually has it set pretty well right off the bat. So there's not a lot of things you need to change there, but there are other buttons that you might want to change. So keep that in mind. Like if we don't use this star button, we could set it to not very many things. I really wish we could set it to more than this. So basically, I'm going to turn it off because it doesn't allow me to do everything that I want it to do. So we've got release shutter without lens. Nope. Why would we want to take pictures without lenses? Most people are never going to want to do that. And then the last thing is retract lens on power off is enabled. So certain lenses will automatically retract. You just leave this on enabled. We've got copyright information. I always put my author's name in there. I also put my copyright details, so it's Jared Polin Frono's photo. I always put that information in my cameras so that my metadata, it's saved in the file when you take the picture. Manuals and software URL. This is going to give you a QR code to load the software, the manual, on a computer or on your phone. You've got your certification logo, doesn't mean anything for you. And you've got your firmware, which is currently set to 1.0. When Canon updates the firmware, you would put the firmware onto a memory card, follow the directions on the screen, and this is where you would go to make those changes. Next up, we have exactly where we started. So I already showed you how to change this. We can skip right past this and go into My Menu Setup. This is where if there's some function that you use often and there isn't a quick way to get to it, you could hit Add My Menu Tab. So we're going to hit OK to add a menu tab. I'm going to hit OK again to configure and select items to register. So if I want to quickly be able to change image quality, I can add that right here to the custom menu. So when I go back, it's going to be there. See, image quality is there. You could just configure and add other things. You could be like, okay, I want to put picture style here, and I hit OK, and now picture style, when I hit menu to go back, is there as well. You can also have a second tab made there for you. This is very good to use, but a lot of the functions you're going to be able to get to from the back of the camera, from the Q menu, which I'm going to show you next. So right before I show you how the Q menu works, you have all of this information on the back of your screen when you're looking through the viewfinder or you are looking at the back of the screen. Now, if I hit info, it's going to toggle a bunch of different things. See, it's going to toggle between the two displays that we set up. But let me run you through what everything is on the outside of the screen here. So what you're seeing in the top left, that is M. That means we're in manual mode. To the right of that, that's 1,720 images left on the card and 6 hours, 29 minutes, and 59 seconds of possible record time. To the right of that, you've got your indicator for how much battery power you have. And let's go under manual now. We've got right there, that's your AF tracking mode, you can see that's what we selected earlier. Shows you an I for IAF being on as well. We're in servo mode below there. Right below there, you can see we're in continuous shooting and the timer is currently off. You've got your metering mode. Then you see that we're in RAW plus large JPEG, and you have your HD for filming at 2997, which is 30 frames a second. Bottom of the screen. So you see where it says 1/80th of a second. Yes, that is how you properly say it, 1/80th of a second. If I go up and I turn the scroll dial, because you can see that there's an orange highlight there, that means I'm controlling the shutter speed manually. Now we're at 1/2500th of a second. Now we're at 1/4000th of a second. That's the highest shutter speed this camera will go. So just understand that it's not 1 out of 250. It's not, I don't even know how else to say it wrong, but it's 1/250th of a second. So to the right of that, you have your aperture. Now, how do we change aperture? That's a great question because we only have one control dial. On some of the future cameras that you will have, you have a dedicated button for aperture. Right here on the back of the camera where you see that trash can, I'm gonna hit up. So when I hit up, did you see that the orange dial moved? So it went from shutter speed to aperture. So now if I turn this top dial, the aperture is changing. So that's how you can control your aperture right from there. If I hit it again, it goes back to the shutter speed. You've got your light meter to the right. That's what you see right here. So if I hit the button halfway down, you can see that it's showing that it's totally underexposed. That's your light meter. To the right of that, it says ISO. Right above ISO, you have a Bluetooth icon which is showing that it's off, and Wi-Fi is currently off. To the right, it says exposure simulation. That's what I showed you earlier. It's showing you that the exposure that you see in the viewfinder is going to be very representative of what your image is going to look like. You have your 3:2 aspect ratio. Above that, creative filters are off. Then we've got the optimizer that is off. You can see that our picture style is set to auto, and we are also in auto white balance. So that is what you see on the back of the camera. Now, when I hit that Q button, it's going to allow me to make changes. So I could change everything right from here without having to go into the menu or change most of the important stuff that comes to stills. We can change the AF method, servo to one shot. We've got drive mode, we've got metering mode, we've got image quality. Most of this stuff you don't need to change, but movie record time, auto white balance, picture style, auto light optimizer, all of the stuff that I already told you. This is how you quickly get there. You can just hit that Q button to make those changes. Then I hit it again. It's gonna take us right back in to the back of the camera. That's how you see all of your different settings, and that's what all of the stuff means on the screen. Let me jump in here and let you know that Canon has a whole lineup of RF and RFS lenses that would be perfect for your R100. There's a link on the screen or down below that can take you to Canon's website to tell you more about all the different lens options that they have, but just know if you think there's a lens that you want, Canon probably has it. Now let's hit the playback button, and now you're seeing what's on the screen. This is how you cycle through your images. You don't have a touch screen, so you can't touch it. Do. So you move around by arrowing left or right. Or you turn that top dial, like I showed you, and you can see that it's jumping 10 images. Or we hit the magnifying glass less, and you see how it checkerboards, or we hit it more, and then we can end up zooming in and keep zooming in, and keep zooming in, and keep zooming in. Wow, that is actually pretty good quality. That looks pretty good. So then we can pull all the way back out. That's how you can zoom in to check out an image. Now, if you want to delete an image, you go right here and there is a trash can. And who comes out of the trash can when you press it, Stephen?
Oscar the Grinch.
Oscar the Grouch.
Grouch.
You said, not the Grinch, the Grouch. So if you want to delete an image, which I don't recommend deleting on camera, you would hit up, and it says, do you want to erase the image? I'm gonna say no, because I don't want to delete the image. The reason I recommend not doing it is, you know, I've got 1900, 1600, however many photos I can get. I don't want to delete that. Now, if we hit info, you can see that you're toggling through the different info settings that we set up. You see, you just arrow through and it goes from image to image to image. These are just wasted images that I took just to do. But actually, remember earlier when I said it looked terrible with the flash? This is without flash, that's with flash. That looks terrible in my opinion. So I go ahead and in this area, I thought it looked much better without the flash. And that is what you see under Playback. Now remember when I said you had a separate menu for video? Let's get into that, because that's going to unlock all of the video capabilities of this camera. We're going to turn this top dial from manual into video, and now I'm going to hit menu, and we have an entire menu set just for your video. Some of the settings are going to be similar that we already saw on the photo side, but this is how you unlock the menu and take full control of it. So shooting mode, we could do manual. You could also do movie auto exposure. Look, you can set it to full auto. It's going to do a pretty good job if you're not sure what you're doing, but if you do know what you're doing and you want full control over it, you can set it to manual. Now, movie record quality. Earlier, we didn't have the ability to go in here and see that we had 4K. Now we have 4K at 24 frames per second. You now have the ability to shoot in 4K if you go into this mode. So choose your settings wisely. High frame rate is currently disabled. So if I enable it, it says movie servo AF, movie digital IS, and audio not available, AF not available in movie mode, movie recording. That's because this is giving you 120 frames per second slow-mo. So if you want to capture your newborn, and by newborn I mean toddler, running around, and you want to do it in slow, then you would put it into that mode. So I'm going to go ahead and leave this disabled. So let's go back into the menu. Sound recording is currently set to auto. I showed you earlier how you could change that to manual as well. Let's go to number 2, exposure compensation. We don't touch it, can't touch it. Well, you can actually touch it. ISO speed sensitivity. You can set this to auto ISO if you want, and it's going to change as you're in certain lighting situations. It might be a better option to use auto ISO when you're shooting video, especially in manual, because you can set your settings to what you want it to be, and then the ISO is going to allow you to keep those settings, and it's going to fluctuate or raise or lower, which is fluctuating, Jared, and give you the settings that you need. Auto light optimizer, off. Highlight tone priority, off. Auto slow shutter, let's see, choose to prioritize brighter or smooth movies in low light. Currently, this is in manual mode, not available. White balance, remember, if you're on a cloudy day, if you're in a bright day, if you're using lights like we're using, you want to dial in the right white balance, because if you don't, it's going to be off and you can't easily correct for that after the fact. It's not like a raw photo format. But auto white balance generally does a pretty good job. Just understand that if you go from inside shooting video to outside, the white balance auto going to shift on you, which sometimes I don't care about. Custom white balance, if you want to set it automatically. White balance correction, adjust the color tone of the selected white balance. Don't need to worry about that. Picture style, go in there and choose the picture style that you want for recording video. Lens aberration correction, this is going to correct it. Remember, you don't really correct the video after the fact, so you can go ahead and do that. Next up, we've got time-lapse movies is currently disabled. That's because I'm plugged into HDMI. It's not going to let me do that, but if I was unplugged, I could do time-lapse movies where it would take a bunch of stills and then turn it into a video. AF method, lock-on tracking, great AF method for shooting video. Now, if you're gonna have someone that's sitting like this in this situation, you could lock off on someone and just focus on their eye, focus on their face, and leave it there. Or if they're gonna be more animated and moving around, you can have it do lock-on tracking. Eye detection, enabled, so it can find the eye. Focus mode, autofocus. Much easier than doing manual focus these days. We've got number 5, lens electronic manual focus is currently off. Movie servo AF is currently enabled. Continuously focus to keep subject sharp as movies are recorded. Yep, we want to keep that like that. And then focus ring control you could use for focusing, because that's what your focus ring is for. You could change it to use as a control ring, but I'm not going to use it as a control ring. Movie self-timer is currently off, and the remote control is enabled, which means you could start or stop using a remote control. IS, image stabilizer mode, remember, we talked about this earlier. Your camera doesn't have stabilization built in, but you could put digital IS on, which is enabling when you're shooting video. So if you're running and gunning, doing vlogs on a moving vehicle, in a car, in a boat, that might be a good time to use that. Next up is digital zoom. I am not a fan of digital zoom at all, so that is currently disabled. Shutter button function for movies, showed you that earlier. Metering mode, shooting info display. You can change your info display for video, which is different, even though it has the same one selected. So really not much here to change right there. Back to the menu, Number 8, viewfinder display format. Same as before. You can see that it's either full or shrunk down just a little bit if you've got your glasses on, and HDMI info display is currently on. Next, we've got playback menu, but everything from this point on is exactly the same that we already did, so we don't have to go in here and change anything. Even your My Menu stuff is already there, and that is the settings for your video features. Now let me walk you around what you're gonna see on the back of the screen or your viewfinder. We got the top left, you can see that it's manual mode for shooting video. You can see that you'll get 29 minutes and 59 seconds when you hit record. You do not have continuous recording where it's gonna go for that 6 hours that I said earlier. It's gonna run for 29 minutes and 59 seconds as long as you have enough room on your card and enough battery power, at which time you will need to hit record again. You could always stop it and start it over and get 29 minutes and 59 seconds. You also have the indicator for your battery, and then you have a camera with an arrow above it, which is showing you the orientation of the camera. I don't think if oh, look at that, I turned it vertical and it's showing you which way it's going to do based on the arrow, which way it's pointing. Now on the left side, once again, just like we had with our stills, we have our focusing modes. It's showing you what's selected. You've got your timer. Below that is what frame rate we're set to. You've got your digital zoom, which is currently off, and then you have your image stabilization settings right below there. Where the green dot is, it's showing that it's servo AF, and green means that it's trying to focus right now. You've got your shutter speed, followed by your aperture to the right of that. Auto ISO, right above there. The Bluetooth is not active, it's grayed out. Your Wi-Fi is currently off. Above the Bluetooth, we have miniature mode. It's not a setting I've ever used. I've rarely ever seen it. We've got digital optimizer is off, your picture style, as well as your auto white balance. And just like photos, if you hit the Q button, it brings up all of the menus that you can change, or these icons that you can go in and make the changes as you see fit. It is really self-explanatory. Canon has done a great job explaining all of this to you, or giving you the features, and I've done a great job of explaining it to you. So if you do like that, definitely give this video a thumbs up. Now let me show you recording video. Take off my lens cap. We are going to hit the red record button. I hit record, and now look what's happening. There is a red box around the outside of the screen. You've got the record up in the top right hand. You've got your timer going down, or it's going up. So right now it's at 12 seconds, 13 seconds, and it's recording. And autofocus should be going on as we speak. So it's autofocusing automatically for you, and that's it. Oh yeah, and changing the exposure. So it's doing a pretty good job. To stop that, I go ahead and I hit record again, and now you can see it's 29:59 is reset once more. This is a very simple camera to use once you get everything set up and explained to you. So I hope you enjoyed this look at how to set up, or how I would set up my Canon R100. I know it's a long video. If you did get this far, leave a comment that says hashtag I got this far, and don't forget to say hashtag, like spell it out, hashtag I got this far, so that I know you did get this far. Please hit the subscribe button so that you can see all future videos that I put out. We put out a ton of videos, from photo news to reviews to critiques to videos just like this, as well as other ones that do comparisons to help you decide what lens might be the next choice for you. So I want to thank Steven for doing this video with me. Thank you, Steven. They can't see you waving. Say you're welcome. Say thank you. You're welcome. Yay, you're welcome. And I want to thank you guys for watching. So there you have it, guys. Jared, PolinFronosPhoto.com. See ya.